Let me enter the room with my cell phone because I need to have the feedback of the chat.
So just a
Okay.
question here, Professor. Are we going to have the
Yes.
test corrections today? Is that it?
Most probably by next week, they will all be corrected.
Oh, I see. Like, no, I was referring not to grading itself, but are you going to correct for us the questions or
Yes,
not?
I'm going to correct individually. I'm going to send individual feedback, and I'm going to record a video with kind of standard correction. Like I'm going to solve the exam for you to see. I'm going to
Oh,
enter Sita and
yeah.
solve it.
So as I thought. Thanks.
Yeah. Let me see. Just mute the cell phone and go to the chat. Right now I can see the chat. Great. So let's start today. We are entering the second uh, step of the subject with the syntax part. Okay. So we are going to discuss, we're going to move a step forward in grammar. We were talking about the word, we were talking about the parts of the words and the word composition process, word formation processes. Now we are going to move in the direction of the sentence, the clause, okay, new elements in grammar. So uh, today I'm going to give you an overview on syntax, okay? So when I talk to you about syntax, I don't know if some of you have ever been familiar with programming languages in computers, but you have probably seen that kind of window popping up and telling you that there was a syntax error with your Windows system or with your Linux system, whatever. Have you ever seen this? When
Not
there's a
only,
when
sorry.
there's a syntax error, it means that something in the programming language was done wrong. Okay, so computers understand they have their proper language and there is a proper order for commands. Let me just turn on the fan. Too hot in here. So computers understand some kind of language. It's based on English. So those who know English uh, have more predisposition to learn how to program. Like I used to when I uh, went to physics college, I had to learn how to program, and basically the commands are if, then, else, things like that. Okay, and mathematical operations. Now, when you make a mistake in programming and you cause a loop or you cause a bug, you receive messages like syntax error. So let's reflect about the meaning of the word syntax. What does syntax mean? When you think of syntax in a more simple language, what do you think of? Victor has a degree in computer science.
Yes,
Uh,
when you said
yeah.
that, I got goosebumps here.
Well,
But yeah,
well, my degree in physics, which I abandoned, was decades ago. So probably used more modern languages than I did. I used Turbo Pascal, which is kind of old, but we had to use languages, words from English like else, if, then. I think this is still valid for C++ and
and Java as
other languages.
well, and PHP. That it is valid for some of the languages that we have today. But I
Yeah,
also studied Pascal as well, so it's
yeah,
not
yeah,
that old.
yeah, yeah. Well, it is from the 70s, I think, but it's still in vogue. Well, when you have syntax error in an algorithm, what does that mean, Victor? Can you tell your classmates what it means when you have syntax error?
So it means that you basically wrote down your code in a, how would I say that, in a incorrect way, but it doesn't have like all the structures that you have to have.
Oh,
So
good word, structure.
the
Mm-hmm.
structure of the sentence, the structure of the line is not 100% correct. So the
Yeah.
computer doesn't understand properly what you're saying. So it gives you a
Mm-hmm.
syntax error.
Yeah, I'm trying to make an interface to establish an interface between programming language and natural languages because I think programming languages are based on natural languages. Computers learn through language. Nowadays, it's kind of a fashion to talk about algorithms. What are algorithms? What can we understand by algorithms? When do you write an algorithm? What is an algorithm for in programming languages?
Basically, to solve problems.
Yeah, it's a way to solve problems. It's a kind of how can I say, a kind of a set of instructions that you give a machine in a proper order so that machines can make decisions for you,
Hmm.
can do some kind of calculus or can predict. For example, algorithms tell Facebook what you are interested in buying because they capture your navigation process and they see somehow the words that you have been searching for. You probably uh, went through a situation in which you searched for bikes and then suddenly Facebook starts offering you bikes, uh, and so on. So algorithms have a lot to do with syntax, with the way, with the arrangement, with the order on how information is processed. Okay. So when we think of syntax, we are basically thinking of order, word order, the way words are arranged to make sense. Do you understand if I say apple, the boy bit, and apple, the boy bit, and? Is it understandable?
Well, it's all over the place, but
Yeah, it's all raffled. Now I
mm,
can say the boy bit an apple, and then you can understand it better. So languages have a natural order, and syntax deals with the order things happen in a language, the order of the word arrangements. So basically, syntax comes from Greek. It means order, okay, arrangement, of course, of the words. Now, syntax will deal with the relation of words to each other as component parts of a sentence or a clause, and with their proper arrangement to express clearly the intended meaning. So here, for example, for me, uh, uh, in the case I belong to the field of discourse analysis, I do not believe in this completely, this thing here, intended meaning, because meaning is sometimes not intended to be there, but it is. But let's forget that we are dealing with structural linguistics, and let's take it as an axiom, as a universal truth that everything we speak, it's because we calculated what we wanted to speak. The information we wanted to provide should be provided in a proper order. And to do so, we need to know the structure of the language and arrange these words in the proper order grammar or syntax tells us to do. Okay, it's the case of computer turned on I, or I turned on the computer. Okay, so um, we are talking now about two different units. In morphology, we talked about morphemes, remember? We talked about stems. We talked about uh, parts of the word. Now, in syntax, we are dealing with the word as one of the minimal units that will form both sentence and clause. As English teachers, I think some of you here are. What is the difference between a sentence and a clause? Which one is the smallest part of the language? If we consider the word as the minimal unit, which is the minimal arrangement of words? A sentence or a clause?
A sentence.
The
A
smallest
sentence?
one?
Yeah,
It's
is it a sentence or a clause?
it's a clause.
It's a
It's a
sentence.
clause.
But why is
Let,
that?
what do you understand by clause and what do you understand by sentence? Let's start
Isn't
like
it
that.
isn't a clause a group of words in which you have at least a subject and a verb?
Yeah.
In a sentence, any group of words?
No, a sentence uh, can be a clausal sentence, which is the simplest one, and it can be a compound sentence, like with two or more clauses. So the clause is smaller than the sentence, okay? You may be thinking of clauses. You may be thinking of clauses with only one word, aren't you? Like interjections, like ouch, or
Probably.
for example, uh, finish that. You do not have a subject, but this subject is implicit. Okay, so when we talk about canonical clauses, things will be more clear for you because we have a kind of standard of the ideal clause. Some clauses are not ideal, so we have to turn them into an ideal one to deal with the investigation of its structure. Okay, probably it's making confusion with you right now, but things are going to get clear as we advance. The clause is a more elementary unit in relation to a sentence. A clause, as you said, there is a subject and a verb, and what we call a complement could be an object, could be a predicative complement, could be yeah, basically an object or a predicative complement or an adverb sometimes. Okay, so a subject, verb, and a complement. A complement is anything that comes after the verb. Okay, let me just erase this. Right, so let's advance. Let's see the difference between sentence and clause now. We distinguish two main types of sentence. Okay, a clausal sentence, as I said. A clausal sentence is a sentence which has the form of a single clause. So we have one clause, and this clause is also a sentence. Okay. Not every clause is a sentence. Okay. But some sentences are made of only one clause. We also have the compound sentence. It has the form of two or more coordinated clauses, and they are usually put together by means of a coordinator and or but. Okay, those um, connectors, those conjunctions, okay, they put clauses together and form a sentence. Example, take this example in A. Sue went to London last week. It is a clausal sentence. Let's analyze it to make sure. Where is the subject here? And
Sue?
Sue is the subject. Now, where's the verb?
Verb to go, went.
Yeah. And to London last week is the direction where she goes. Okay. London is the object. Let's put it this way. It's the object of her movement, of going to London. Okay, to is a preposition, so it's an indirect object. But let's not go into this level of detail right now. Let's call this just the complement. Okay. Last week would be an adverb, an adverbial phrase. Okay. We could go into a more detailed level, but let's get satisfied by this basic structure right now. Sue went to London last week, so we have subject, verb, and all the rest of the sentence that we call the complement. This is a clausal sentence. Sue went there. We could change all these for a there. Sue went there. Okay. That's what I'm proposing here, a simple analysis. Okay. Now, this is the most basic structure for a sentence. And this is also a one clause sentence. That's why I call it a clausal sentence. Now, take B. Sue went to London last week, and her father went with her. How many sentences do I have here? Sentences, basically, they have a punctuation, like a period, a question mark, and so on. We have how many sentences?
One.
One. But we have two clauses. Let's prove this. I can separate these two clauses here. The one in green, Sue went to London last week, that we have already discussed, and her father went with her. Okay, we can change the pronouns here, like Sue's. Sorry for the handwriting. Sue's father went with Sue, or went with her, not to be redundant. Now, let's isolate this, forget the end, and let's take this as a clause, as a sentence as well. We have two clausal sentences here. Her father went with her. Sue's father went with her. If I say her father went with her, you do not understand it on its own. Whose father? With her? Who is her? Who is she? If I don't mark Sue here, you will never know. So this sentence is referring back to the one in green, the first one. This clause in purple is referring back to the clause in green. But as I eliminate the pronoun and put Sue here, it gets a meaning on its own. So let me erase this. Okay. So take this example. Let's analyze this. Sue's father went with her. Let's go to the board. I hope it works. Sue's father went to London. Okay, but let's make it simple. Oops. With her. Right, let me change the color. Okay, what is the subject in this poor handwritten sentence? Where's the subject?
Sue's father?
Yeah, Sue's father is the subject. Where is the verb? It's to go, yeah, verb. And with her, let's call it the complement. We know that with is a preposition and her is the indirect object, but we should not go into this level of detail right now. So we have the structure, the basic structure: subject, verb, complement. Okay, do you agree with that? So we have basically we have subject, verb, complement in clause 1. We have Just a moment. It's a propaganda in my tablet. We have the and. Oops. And we have another structure with subject, verb, and complement in clause 2. As you may prefer to give names for things here, we have one clause, you have a conjunction here, and you have the second clause. Going back to the slide, you have this, okay? So and is a conjunction, or if you prefer to call it a coordinator, okay? That puts clause 1 in green and clause 2 in purple together. So are you convinced that the clause is a more basic unit than the sentence? It's a smaller unit in relation to the sentence? Oh, Professor, but how can we classify things that we say that do not have a verb? Like ouch, or like damn it. In damn it, we have a verb, but we do not have a subject. We're going to talk about interjections, okay, in no time. Interjections are not the dominant type of clause, but there is a way, fortunately, there is a way to turn non-dominant types of clauses into the dominant ones, into the more numerous ones that we call canonical clauses, okay? We are going to discuss the nature of canonical clauses, what they are, and what's their use in synthetic analysis, okay? So take the case of this sentence, also a clause. This is both a sentence and a clause. We read the text which you recommended. Some of you may say, teacher, this is not a one clause sentence. This is a two clause sentence because we have two verbs, read and recommended. What I'm trying to do here is to demonstrate to you that this is a clausal sentence because there is something in the second part of the sentence referring back to the first, okay? This is a clausal sentence even though it contains supposedly two clauses, okay? Because there are two verbs. And as you said, a verb is one of the requisites for a clause. But let's look at what happens here. One of the clauses, the clause which you recommended, which seems to be clause 2, we have clause 1 here, and clause 2, okay? But it is part of the other rather than separate from it. Clause 2 is part of clause 1. Why? The which you recommended, this part in purple, is part of what we call the noun phrase, the text which you recommended. Oh, teacher, what is a noun phrase? A noun phrase is a group of words whose head is a noun, okay? So we have some elements, some synthetic elements, like we mentioned today, clause, sentence, and phrase. Now, what is a phrase? A phrase is a set of words in which one grammatical element, a verb, a noun, an adverb is the head. What is the head of a verb phrase? It's a verb. What is the head of a noun phrase? It's a noun. What's the head of an adjective phrase? It's an adjective. When I say head, I mean the most important word for that phrase to make sense. Okay? So take this, which you recommended. In fact, it's part of the noun phrase, the text which you recommended. We read the text which you recommended. So I have here a noun phrase. What is the head of this noun phrase? It's the word text. Okay. Inside this noun phrase, in red, you have the which you recommended. Which you recommended is a verb phrase. We are going to discuss noun phrases, verb phrases with more detail as the course progresses, okay? But for the moment, believe me, I have a verb phrase inside a noun phrase, okay? It's the same as to say, we read it, okay? So if I can change the whole thing for a pronoun, what I have here is a noun phrase. Questions about this?
No, sir.
Like, I drove that powerful car. That powerful car can be changed by it. I drove it. That powerful car is a noun phrase. Inside this noun phrase, we have the word powerful. Okay, so powerful is an adjective. Okay, it is not an adjective phrase because there is no other word associated with it. But if I put two adjectives together, like I drove that fast and powerful car. Now, fast and powerful is an adjective phrase. Inside the noun phrase, that powerful and fast, that fast and powerful car. I can change this part in purple for a simple pronoun, it. We read it. So what we have here is a clausal sentence. There is only one clause because this second clause, which you recommended, is referring back to an element in the first clause. I will erase it not to make confusion, to make a more simple diagram. Which you recommended is referring back to the text. And if you split it into clause 1 and clause 2, there is something in clause 2 referring back to clause 1. Do you agree that which you recommended makes reference to the text?
Yes, I can see that.
Yeah, we call this a predicative complement. When something in the second clause refers back to something in the first clause, it is a predicative complement. Okay, we read the text. Which text? The one which you recommended. So to conclude that we have only one clause, we do this. We read the text. Which one? The text which you recommended. We read it. And this, the text which you recommended, is a noun phrase. Why? Because the head of this phrase is the word text. Right? Any questions so far? too many concepts to memorize for the moment. We are going to explore them one by one as we move on the discussion, okay, as we move forward. So the larger clause is we read the text which you recommended. And this does not constitute the whole sentence, like in Sue went to London last week. Okay. Sue went to London last week is a whole sentence. If I say we read the text, something is missing. There's a natural question behind it. Which text are you talking about? So I need this second piece of information. Here, I have a complete piece of information. If I tell you, I fixed the car, do you understand when I name the car? If you do not have the context, I fixed the car. Teacher, which car? Oh, my car or Victor's car. Okay, I have to specify. If the meaning is not full on its own, what comes after it is probably a predicative complement. Questions?
Not for
You're
me.
too silent. Let's move on. The fact that the two types of sentence are distinguished in terms of clauses implies that we take the clause to be a more basic unit than the sentence. The very first discussion we conducted here, okay, which is the most basic, the clause or the sentence? Well, a sentence is built up of clauses. So the clause is a more basic unit than the sentence, which reflects the fact that in speech, it tends to be more difficult to determine the boundaries between sentences than the boundaries between clauses. One verb, one clause. Okay, now a sentence may have two, three, or more verbs because sentences can have two, three, or more clauses. Sentences are a more complex unit, and it's more difficult to determine what is a sentence than what is a clause. Okay? This is just theory. So, for the moment, just keep in mind that when I talk about clause, I'm talking about the raw material for sentences. Okay? The raw material for clauses are words, basically verbs. The raw material for sentences are clauses. Now, the thing that puts clauses together to make complex sentences are coordinators, okay? Or subordinators, as we shall see when we see subordinated periods. Now, clauses can behave in a more predictable way, in a more classic grammatical way, or they can be somehow different, like having no verb. We have discussed interjections, for example, like gosh, ouch. They are clauses, but they do not have a verb. Why not? Because they are non-canonical. Now, what it means to be canonical? What is canonical literature? Have you ever heard about the word canonical? Or the canonical texts? What are the canonical texts? For those who know a bit about religion, what are they considered the canonical texts? Or what does it mean to canonize someone?
To make it valuable, to make it saint, even.
Yeah, to make it valuable. That's the word, to make it valuable. When I talk to you about canonical literature in Portuguese or in English, which authors do you think about?
I feel like that's a tricky question, isn't it? Like,
Not really. I'm talking about a conception of literature more to T.S. Eliot than to those inclusive literature professors from nowadays. But have you ever watched Dead Poets Society, the
yes, yes,
film?
I have. Yeah.
hmm Basically, for those traditional professors, what was canonical literature?
Okay.
I had to take a subject in USP when I was in my degree, taking my degree, which was Leituras do Cânone 2, 2 e 3. That was that was good, if you understand me.
All right.
What do you think we had to read? Shakespeare for sure. What
Mhm.
else? In fact, Shakespeare, we had a specific subject for Shakespeare. Two: Shakespeare theater and Shakespeare uh, novels. Sorry, poems. Poems and theater. But what do you think I saw in Leituras do Cânone?
Do you mean English language? I would
In
say
English language, yeah.
Lord Byron, maybe. Charles
Byron,
Dickens. Um,
Dickens,
Mary
the Bronte
Shelley.
sisters.
I think that's
Now,
it.
what do you understand by a canon?
Something that is already pre-established. That it's there. It's never changing. It's always a reference.
A classic,
Yeah.
yeah, with no,
Yeah, you summarize everything I said in one word. So.
yeah, something that does not get invalid with aging, for example. As time goes
Mhm.
by, it's still valid. Now, that's the idea of creating a kind of category called canonical clauses. Canonical clauses are those classic ones, are those that have nothing missing. They have a kind of prototypical, they are prototypical structures of a clause. Now, what is the prototypical structure of a clause we have just discussed? This one: a subject, a verb, and something after the verb called the complement here, just to make it simpler. This is the basic structure of a canonical clause. Now, some clauses do not follow this structure, and then we call them non-canonical. But we can shape them, we can arrange them, we can manipulate them in order to make them canonic. Okay, so there are certain rules uh, to tell if a clause is canonical or not. Why do we need canonical clauses? Because canonical clauses are more predictable, consequently, they are more analyzable. And if we get across a clause that is non canonical, you turn into canonical to make your analysis easier. And then you revert it back after analyzed to its original form. You get this the trick. Victor, that is from computer science, probably knows when we are solving an equation and we have a very difficult equation. One of the possible ways to solve it is split it into smaller equations, solve them, and then put them together, isn't it? Like you have a big algebra problem. You get part of this algebra structure, solve it, and put it back later on in the biggest equation. Too complicated? Yeah,
Not
I
really.
know you are. I know you are blaming me. This is math. Uh, Grammar and math, they are kind of similar. Yeah. In Portuguese, it's not by coincidence that both of them end with mática. What does mática mean? Gramática, matemática, automática. O que é uma mática? É uma estrutura, é uma máquina, né? É um sistema, para usar aqui um termo sociriano, tá? Ok. Sem mais delongas, vamos ver o que são essas canonical and non-canonical clauses. We can describe the structure of clauses most economically if we distinguish between the most basic and elementary kinds of clause, which we call canonical clauses. The idea is that we can present the analysis more clearly if we begin with canonical clauses, describing them directly, and then deal in turn with the various kinds of non-canonical clause, describing these indirectly in terms of how they differ from canonical clauses. Remember, Saussure, in language, something is what something else is not. A non-canonical clause is what a canonical clause is not. So instead of telling you what canonical clauses are, I'll tell you what canonical clauses are not. And by elimination of characteristics, you will be able to conclude, oh, this is a canonical clause. This is easy to deal with. This is easy to analyze. Oh, this is not a canonical clause. How can I make it canonical? I need to analyze it. So first step, make it canonical. Okay? Too much confusion?
Not really.
Let's take a look at the set of slides about canonical clauses. Just a moment. Oops. Just a moment. So, the difference between a canonical clause and a non-canonical clause is the following. So, a canonical clause in A, column A here, and column B here, okay? Take a look at 1A. Sue has read your article. In B, Sue has not read your article is non-canonical. What's the first conclusion you get? A canonical clause is, or a canonical clause is not. This is the column of canonical. This is the column of non-canonical. What is the difference between sentence A and sentence B?
One is on affirmative and one's the negative.
Yeah, so canonical clauses are never negative, okay?
Okay.
Canonical clauses are never negative. In the second line, Sue is coming for dinner. And on the other column, in B, is Sue coming for dinner? Now, what's the difference?
It's not an interrogative. The canonical clause is not interrogative.
Yeah, so we get these two elements, okay, to say canonical clauses are always positive, okay? It's more than saying affirmative, because this is affirmative. Sorry. Like, I have no money is affirmative. Because of the rule of double negatives, we don't say I don't have any money. I don't have no money. I have no money. It has a negative value, but it is positive. Okay. It has a negative semantics, but it has a positive structure. You affirm something. Okay. In number 3, they knew the victim. And in B, she said that they knew the victim. What's the difference in A and B?
One is on direct speech and one is the indirect speech.
Very good. So canonical clauses are never reported speech, are never indirect speech. They are always direct, or they are never indirect. One is what the other is not. In this case, it's a dichotomy. In for A, he missed the train is canonical. In B, either he missed the train or it is late. And now, what is the difference you can see?
One is conditional and the other one is not.
But we have a bigger classification for conditionals. If, or, thus, however, we have those conjunctions. And conjunctions are called coordinators or subordinators. So canonical clauses are never subordinated. Okay, I cannot understand it is late on its own. I will just understand it is late with the first clause, he missed the train. So we have the either or. Let me erase this. We have either or as a special kind of conjunction that is split, yeah, one at the beginning of the sentence and the other part at the middle. We have either or. This is a conjunction, a kind of a set of conjunctions. There are never conjunctions in canonical clauses because they are clause, yeah. So they cannot be joined by coordinators or subordinators, okay? And the last one, the secretary took the key. And in B, the key was taken by the secretary. What is the difference?
One is in active voice and one is passive.
So canonical clauses are never passive. They are always active. Most of these are dichotomies. Okay, the dichotomy between positive and negative, or positive and interrogative. In this case, it's not a dichotomy, it's a trichotomy. The dichotomy between reported and direct speech. The dichotomy between coordinated and subordinated and non-subordinate clauses, okay? And the dichotomy between passive and active. So what we are going to see now is a summary of what we have been discussing. Canonical clauses are declarative. Okay, it's the same as saying what we classically know from textbooks as affirmatives, but it's a more precise term. They are declarative. Interrogatives are non-canonical, as are the other clause types like imperatives and exclamatives. Okay, imperatives like please stand up are non-canonical. But if I say I want you to stand up, now it's canonical. Stand up commands, imperatives are non-canonical, but we can change them into canonical structures. Exclamatives, the same way, because we have some kind of word inversion. What a fool I have been. You can turn it into a more natural structure. I have been a fool. Okay. Canonical clauses are positive. So negatives are non-canonical. Canonical clauses are necessarily main clauses. Subordinate clauses, as the underlined clause in she said that they knew the victim is canonical. Okay? But when I put that, I have a problem. The clause is not they knew the victim, but that they knew the victim. Now that is a conjunction. Okay? So it is non-canonical now. Okay? She said what? That they knew the victim. Oh, teacher, but we can omit this that. This is grammatical. She said they knew the victim. And now, well, although it's omitted, it's not because I omit something that it does not exist. It's an omission, but that is implicit. I'll put IMP like implicit. What is implicit is there, but it's hidden. Do you agree with me? It's not because if I do something wrong and I don't tell you, it does not mean I didn't do something wrong. I did it and I kept it hidden from you. But my mistake is there. You see? Oops. So they are main clauses. Subordinate clauses are always non-canonical. Any questions so far? This is a summary of what we have been discussing from the previous chart, from the previous table. Canonical clauses are non-coordinate. The two underlined clauses in either he missed the train or it is late are coordinated. Either or, the structure either and or, we call them coordinators. It is late. Okay, you understand. If you have the reference for it, you understand. If you know that it is the train is late. He missed the train is a complete information. But when I put the two ideas together with either or, then I have coordination. And then each of them is called a non-canonical structure, a non-canonical clause. Okay? And they are active. Passive clauses like the article was written are non-canonical. She wrote the article, canonical. The article was written, non-canonical. Okay? Any questions so far?
No.
Why are you learning this? Why are you learning to distinguish canonical from non-canonical? Because as you know how to identify non-canonical structures and being able to turn them into canonical, it will make your syntactic analysis easier. It's like solving the smallest part of the equation to then, in a later moment, go back to the biggest equation. Let's see the properties of the canonical clauses. Canonical clauses package the information in a grammatically most basic way. Thus, I have now read most of the texts is canonical, but most of them, the texts I have now read, is not. So there is a proper order for canonical clauses. Most of the texts I have now read is non-canonical. I have now read most of the texts is canonical. There is an order, and that order is subject, verb, complement. In this case, subject, auxiliary verb, adverb, verb, and object. And we have a canonical structure. I can call this subject, verb capsule, and object. What is the verb capsule? Is the verb and everything that orbits around the verb. Adverbs, because of their naming, are close to verbs. The auxiliary verb, as the name says, is orbiting around the verb. So the head is the verb. I call this the verb capsule, cápsula verbal. Fica claro para vocês que é uma cápsula verbal? Eu estou só simplificando essa estrutura. Nessa sentença, in this sentence here, I have, which is auxiliary. Now is an adverb. And read is the main verb. O now determina o tempo do verbo to read. E o have trabalha como auxiliar de present perfect. Tudo isso aqui, esses dois caras, orbitam em torno do read. Is it clear? Por isso que eu chamo isso aqui de cápsula verbal. Verb Capsule. Ok? Any question about this?
Um, it's not that clear the whole concept of verbal capsule. Like, is it like something that orbitates around the actions? Is that it? In
Yeah,
a
yeah.
sentence?
For example, what is the adverb? The adverb will tell you when or the mode an action was carried out. So, for example, now. Now determines the time of the action. It's an adverb. It's in function of the verb. É como se estivesse em função de. Ou have. Have is a verb. I can use have as a main verb. I have a car. But in this case here, have is not this have. It's another kind of have used to mark present perfect. So in this case, it's an auxiliary verb. Auxiliary for what? An auxiliary for the verb to read. So it's referring back to read.
But my question
This
is,
is a...
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. What is your question?
Does that happen only on actions, or is there any other situations where this can appear that I can see other kinds of situations besides taking actions, as of like um, static verbs, for example, like I love reading, or like love reading, is that the capsule there or not? Or am
No.
I
Okay, let's take
confusing
this. I
everything
love
here?
reading. Let's take I love reading as an example. A moment. So I love reading. Let's do syntactic analysis here. Subject. I. Oops. Where's the verb?
Love.
Is there any other verb?
That is.
Can we say this is a verb capsule? Or instead, we can say that reading, consider this suffix. What kind of suffix is this? Let's go back to morphology. Is this a derivational noun forming suffix, or is this an inflection in the verb to read?
It is inflection, isn't it?
It's not.
It's
This is a
not. Okay.
derivational noun forming suffix. Why? Take a simpler sentence. I love it. And if I can change reading for it, and it is a pronoun, sorry, then pronouns can only work to substitute nouns. And that's why this is a derivational noun forming subject.
Oh,
I
I
know.
see.
So in this case, we do not really have a verb capsule, but what we have is a verb that was derived into a noun. And then we have love reading. Looks like we have two verbs, but it just looks like. What we have, in fact, is a subject, a verb, and a noun operating as direct object. I love it. What do you love? Reading. Okay?
Yeah, I got it now.
Okay, so a verb capsule is when you have, for example, compound verb tenses like present perfect, future continuous, present continuous. In these verb tenses, you will normally have verb capsules because we do not have only one verb. We have the verb inflected and most of the times being preceded by at least one auxiliary verb. Sometimes an auxiliary verb and an adverb, like the case we are taking here. I have now read most of the texts. Okay? Is this clear now?
Yes, yes, it is. Thank you very
How about
much.
the other students? Are you following the class? Are you do you understand everything I'm saying here? Can I move on? Can we advance? Please don't leave questions without answers. I may not have the answer now, but I may bring it for you next class, but please ask. Okay? Don't keep questions accumulated. So, the second case in purple, most of them, I mean, the texts, I have now read. In this case, I have a completely inverted order. I have the object starting the sentence, the clause, sorry. I have the subject after the object, the auxiliary verb, adverb, and verb at the end. So this is a non-canonical structure. So we have canonical properties like being positive, being declarative, uh, being direct speech, and we have also the structure. The order of the words should be somehow as it's prescribed. This is the word. There is a prescription for word order, and it should be subject, verb capsule, object, or complement. It will not always be an object. Canonical clauses then always preserve the subject, verb, object order. SVO all the time. But teacher, this is not V. Okay, call it VC for more complex verb tenses. Okay, but when I mean V for verb, I also mean VC for verb capsule. Okay, every time I say V, it can be a simple verb like I like chocolate, or a verb capsule, or like I have eaten chocolates yesterday. Okay, so consider V for verb or verb capsule, right? This is the basic order, the most basic order you all teach your students when you go to English book 1 and you say, I am John. Okay, this is the most basic type of word order in English. Any question about this? All the other more complex structures will derive out of the simple one. So, exploring what we have already discussed, we have the comparison between 3A and 3B. They knew the victim. She said that they knew the victim. In all the examples, the non-canonical clauses differ in their structure from canonical clauses, but this is not always so. In 3B, we have discussed this. The subordinate clause is introduced by that, but we could omit this, given she said they knew the victim, where the underlined clause is identical with 3A. That they knew the victim here, they knew the victim, I'm underlining it in purple, equals to they knew the victim. We have the that, which is a conjunction, and a sentence that is exactly a copy of the very first one. This is the same as A. So what happens? Nevertheless, it is still subordinate and hence non-canonical. It is subordinate by virtue of being complement of the verb said. She said. What did she say? She said so and so. She said this. There is no she said as an independent sentence. If I come to you and say, oh, Vitor said, Professor, what did Vitor say? Vitor said that he studied a lot this weekend. So there is a subordination relationship between Vitor said and what Vitor said. Do you understand this, class? What is subordination? When the meaning of the first part depends on the meaning of the second part. Is it clear for you? Do you all see the subordination relationship in B here? She said. Can you make a meaning out of this in the... Can you grasp the meaning out of she said?
Not really. We need like something else, something extra to
Yeah.
go with it.
This needing something extra means the need for a subordinate clause. The subordinate clause is exactly what she said. Okay. She said that, or she said she went to London. This she went to London is the subordinate clause for she said. Oh, teacher, but we don't have the subordinator. We do not have the that. We have it. It's omitted, but we have it. It does not mean, just to give you a practical example, it does not mean that corruption does not exist because it's hidden by the politics. Okay, it's there. Everybody knows it's there. It's just well hidden. Okay, it's the same way here. The that can be omitted, but being omitted means it does exist, right? So the subordination happens not to be marked. It is not explicit, but it's there. In the internal grammar, it happens not to be marked in the internal grammatical structure of the clause itself. This is the marker for subordination. Okay, can be omitted, yes, but it's still there. Questions about this?
I'm fine.
Let's take 5. The secretary took the key, and the key was taken by the secretary. So in B, this clause is non-canonical because it lacks at least one of the mentioned properties, that is, being positive, declarative, main clause, non-coordinate, or active. In this case, what does the clause lack? There is a kind of deficiency in the clause. The clause should be positive. Is it? Take the clause in B. The key was taken by the secretary. Is it positive? Being positive means not having a not.
Yes, it is.
Is it declarative? Like providing information? Does it declare something? Like the earth is round. It's
Yeah, it
declarative.
does.
Yeah. Declarative is like the language for definitions. Is it the main clause? The key was taken by the secretary. Well, it's only one clause. So, of course, it's main. If there is only one, it is the main clause. Is it non-coordinate? Do you see any coordinators here? Like that, which, but, or, either. Do you see? Is it coordinate?
I don't think it is.
No, it's not coordinate. So it's okay. Up to now, it is canonic. The problem is here. Is it active?
No, it's passive
It's not.
voice.
Passive voice to be taken. And this is the problem. Okay, so you should keep this routine in mind. Okay, what canonical clauses are and what they are not.
So I have a question about that. Can we
Mhm.
can we say that the voice of the verb is passive? Is that correct? This is something that just popped in my head here.
We normally say that the voice of the sentence or the clause. Yeah, but the verb, we talk about the verb tense. Like the verb tense here is past participle.
Oh,
Okay,
I see.
the
Hmm.
verb is in the participle. The sentence, we talk about the voice of the sentence or the voice of the clause, and we talk about the tense
Okay.
of the verb. Okay, so the verb
So
tense is in the participle, and the sentence voice is passive.
when it comes to voices, it's about sentences, not the verbs, right?
Sentences and clauses, yeah, yeah.
Okay, all right.
And
That
when
was
it comes
something
to
that
tense,
I was a bit
mhm.
confused by that.
But I mean, in informal language, it's common that even teachers say, "Oh, the verb is in the passive voice." Okay, but in fact, what's in the passive voice is the clause.
Yeah,
The verb
gotcha.
is in the participle, right? All right. So let's practice. Okay. We should not only know how to define. We should go to work now. Let's get it to analysis. So we have some clauses here, and I want you to tell me if they are canonical or non-canonical. Let's do some. Okay. My family came for Christmas. Do you think it's canonical? Is it subject verb complement structure? This is the first thing you should look at.
I think
My
it
family
is.
came for Christmas.
Yeah, subject, verb, complement.
The subject, my family,
Hmm.
the verb to come. How about for Christmas? We call it the complement. Yeah, the purpose. Yeah. Yes. Is it negative?
No,
Is it interrogative?
uh-uh.
Passive voice?
No.
Coordination, subordination? So if there's no problem with it, it is canonical. That's great. This is the house that I bought. I'll let you think about this. Where are my other students? Why are you so quiet? Let's participate. Think of these. This is the house that I bought. Do you think it's canonical or non canonical? I'd like to hear divergent voices here. Negative, interrogative. Think of the routine. Is the sentence negative? This is the house that I bought. Is this sentence negative? Can you see a not here in B? No. So it's 1 point to be canonical. Is the sentence interrogative?
No.
Passive voice. You're probably wondering about this. Is this a subordinator or not? We have a similar example. We have explored a similar example slides before. Like, I went to the hotel which you recommended, or I read the text which you recommended. This is the house that I bought. Let's, if you are considering this that a kind of conjunction, then we should split the sentence into two clauses. This is the house, clause 1, and that I bought, clause 2. And this would be the subordinator, which would make this clause non-canonical. This is a hypothesis, okay? Now, let's check it. This is the house. If I come to you and say, this is the house, do you understand it? Can you make a meaning out of it without a context? This is the house.
No.
Which house? The house that I bought. Now, reflect about my point here. Is this that I bought describing the house, or is this an independent clause?
It is describing.
Yeah, describing is not a very good word. I'm sorry. It is referring back to the house. It is specifying which house I'm talking about. So is this an independent clause or a predicative complement? What is a predicative complement, Professor? Well, a predicative complement is anything that refers back to give further explanation. Does it look like clause 1 and clause 2, or a predicative complement for house?
It is a complement. It is
It is a
specifying
complement.
which house is it.
And if it's a complement, this structure is a clausal structure. I have only one clause here because the second supposed clause is not really a clause. It's part of the noun phrase, the house that I bought. Here I have a noun phrase whose head is house, the noun house. And that I bought is specifying the noun house. Taking all these considerations into account, is this canonical or non-canonical?
Non-canonical.
Subject verb complement? Do you see
But
it?
but yeah, I do kind of, but I feel like there are two clauses there, so they are not.
Y-
I don't know,
y-
like I don't know
You're
if
puzzled by the that. You're puzzled by this that, right?
I thought that every single subordinate clause wouldn't be canonical because they need something else. I don't
Mm.
know. I'm a bit
But
confused
yeah,
here.
but what we have been discussing here, just a moment, I have something being delivered here. Can you wait for me 5 minutes? No,
Sure,
3 minutes. A
no
moment.
problem.
Oh, sorry about that. I'm back. Do you hear me?
Yes, no problem. No problem at all.
Okay. Uh, Today we have espresso in my home.
Nice.
My birthday gift. I bought myself. Okay, so this is the house that I bought. Let's consider this just to close the class. This is the house that I bought is not a too close sentence. Okay, looks like, but it's not. What is my point here? The that I bought is part of the house that I bought. This that I bought is not a second clause. It's just referring back to the house. So I have a clausal sentence here in B. Okay. In B, I do not have a compound sentence with two clauses. I have a clausal sentence. Being a clausal sentence, to know if it's canonical or non, I should now see, is this the SVC structure? Subject. This. Yeah, every pronoun is a subject, either a subject or object. This is the subject. Is the verb. And the complement is what it is. This is it. What is it? The house that I bought. I can get everything here and call it it. This is it. This is the house. Which house? The house that I bought. Okay. Now let's clean this mess here that I have made. We have SVC. Now let's check. We have subject, verb, complement. Do you all agree that we have subject, verb, and complement?
On
Yes.
letter C?
On letter B.
Letter B,
This is
sorry.
the house. Subject, verb, and complement. Do you all agree with that? Now let's go to our algorithm, our routine. Is it negative? No. You don't see a not there. Is it interrogative? Not interrogative. Is it passive voice? This is it. Don't think of this is the house that I bought. We have come to an agreement that we are going to call it just it. É como chamar a equação matemática complexa de x. Chama de x, mas não chama de x, chama de it. This is it. Is it negative? No. Is it interrogative? No. Is it passive? No. Is it coordinated? No, because we decided to call it it. Por que, que a gente chama isso de it? Porque a gente decidiu que esse that I bought não é uma independent clause. Ela é parte da descrição house, de house. Ok? Portanto, é canônico ou não canônico? Se cumpre todos os requisitos, ela é non-canonical because of coordination. Peraí. Agora eu que me confundi. Para mim que ela é canônica.
Uh, the
This is
because
it.
I thought that if they are canonical, they don't need anything else to like to make sense. Like they are not informative. What was the term that you used?
Declarative.
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 And I
This
don't feel like this is declares
this
anything.
this is it. Yeah, it's not declarative. This is the house that I bought. Ok. Vamos pensar sobre essa frase na próxima aula, tá? Eu quero revisar ela, porque ela se parece muito. Deixa eu voltar aqui. Era para ser canônica. Eu vou dar uma olhada no que aconteceu. Ela parece muito com essa daqui. Opa. Tá fechando, só para a gente. Ó, essa daqui. Reread the text which you recommended. Is a clausal sentence, even though it contains two clauses. Ah, tá. É uma clausal sentence, mas ela tem duas clauses. Só que a segunda não é subordinada. Because one clause which recommended is part of the other, which recommended is part of the noun phrase. Para mim que ela é canônica, e ali no slide está errado, tá? A gente vai dar uma olhadinha com mais calma, tá? Na próxima aula eu prometo dirimir essa dúvida. Eu pediria a vocês que se debruçassem sobre as outras, que são mais simples. Vou mostrar aqui no fim do vídeo, porque aí vocês recorrem ao fim do vídeo para pensar sobre as próximas. Ops, não mostra o gabarito? Aqui. Pensem sobre B até H, tá? E não colem lá no frame que ficou as respostas, porque, como vocês viram, tem uma controvérsia sobre essa aqui que eu quero refletir sobre a B. Pode ter mais controvérsia, tá? Emma plays the piano very well, Jesus, how brilliant she is, and so on, ok? Essa listinha. Pensem sobre. Não é uma tarefa, é uma sugestão para vocês praticarem o roteiro canônico, não canônico. Eu vou refletir sobre a B e trazer uma resposta definitiva para vocês, porque eu estou achando que foi um erro de quadros ali de animação. Ela está muito mais para canônica para mim. This is it, né? This is the house. Which house? The one that I bought. Ok? Para mim está como canônica. Eu vou dar uma pensada direitinho para dizer para vocês. Se por acaso eu estou equivocado nessa análise e a outra que estava lá está certa, né? Qual que é a análise correta, tá? As outras são um pouco mais simples, tá bom? Any questions? Tá todo mundo quietinho? Já foi todo mundo para outra aula?
Não, minha. Se eu esquecer dessa letra B, que eu fiquei embaralhadíssimo.
Não, ela tá confusa mesmo, mas eu vou buscar uma explicação para ela. Eu acredito, Vitor, que foi na hora de animar, né, os quadros NC, C, NC, e ele foi para o lugar errado, tá? Eu acho que ela é canônica, mas eu vou tentar me convencer disso, tá? Eu vou tentar me convencer para a gente pensar direitinho, por quê? Porque para mim ali não tem subordinação, tem predicative complement, né? Então eu vou ver direitinho o que está acontecendo, tá bom?
Ok,
A
tranquilo,
princípio, eu
professor.
estou mais convencido dessa versão do Predicative Complement. Depois eu confiro com vocês direitinho, tá? Beleza? Fechamos por hoje. Na terça nos vemos. Até a terça, eu vou gravar um vídeo que não vai ser parte do horário que vai ser usado como aula. Vou gravar um vídeo com a correção, na verdade, uma resolução padrão da avaliação, tá? Para vocês terem uma noção, tá bom? Tudo que vocês escreveram será levado em conta, tá? Fillers, quem errou um filler, pelo amor de Deus, não vai perder a questão toda porque errou um filler, tá? Para mim é mais importante que vocês distingam prefixo, sufixo, root, os conceitos, tá bom? Não se preocupem tanto com a avaliação. Se ninguém tem mais nenhuma dúvida, a gente fecha por aqui por hoje, tá bom? Abraço, gente. Tenha uma ótima aula para quem tem uma próxima.
See you.
See you.